A lot of Africans and Nigerians, they struggle to tell the difference between what an agent is and what an asset is. So an agent is someone who directly works for somebody. Let's say, for example, if you are working for me, you are my agent. You act in my stead, all right? But an asset is a bit different. An asset is different in the sense that somebody can be an asset and they don't even know that they are an asset. Why am I saying this? So there's this conversation that's been on Twitter lately, where any small thing people will say that the government have the CIA have a lot of assets in Africa, have a lot of assets in Nigeria, and they tend to believe they confuse that word asset to mean that every single person that is accused of being an asset is an agent. But an agent is different. An agent is someone who directly works for the CIA, who has a clearance with the CIA, who is an employee of the CIA. An asset, on the other hand, it's completely different. Somebody can be an asset without knowing. For example, if let's say the CIA wants to influence policies in Nigeria, all they have to do is to recruit a bunch of assets. And how do they do that? By sponsoring events, by pouring money into so many things. So what happens is that by the time the Ford Foundation or the McCarthy Foundation or all of those other, tricky foundations start sponsoring a human rights activist, for example, and they start handing money over to that person, what that does is it automatically skews the person's judgment and makes the person to act against the interest of the entire good of his own people without even knowing. Because if somebody is funding you, the likelihood that you are going to be looking into that person for their role in your poverty, and the likelihood that you look at the person's role in your in your bad governance becomes very, very it becomes a thing you would normally do. It becomes difficult. So you need to understand that just because they say somebody is a CIA asset does not mean that the person actually knows, or does not even mean that the person has a clearance to the CIA building somewhere in the USA, or the person was actively recruited by the CIA to join them. That is not how it works. So to be a CIA asset, what that means is that the CIA has, in one way or another, either through NGOs or through other form of ways, they have in one way or other got in touch with you, and sometimes you will not even know because they come in by way of grants, by way of NGOs and so many other things you would think that are innocent, but in the shadows, these are things that are working against your interest. And what happens is once they are able to bring you into such situation, you see that for you to look at such organization with a negative view and to even investigate them becomes difficult because you are not receiving funding from them. So this is what I want a lot of Africans and Nigerians to know. So just because a reporter or a journalist says that somebody is a CIA asset does not mean that the CIA directly recruited the person to work for them. You need to understand that someone can be an asset even without knowing. All that matters is that as long as they fall in line and they are working in accordance with what the CIA wants, and in most cases you know that once money is involved, once somebody is sponsoring you, and the likelihood of you looking into their business and the negative things they are doing becomes extremely difficult.